Fringe Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime. Coming to you live from the Mistopheles Studios, it's Dark Fringe Radio.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The disease, and I'm the cure. That is power.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on another episode of Dark Fringe Radio. I'm your host, Will Martinez, and I'm here with Jay Galosi, my co-host, as always, and welcome to 2024. Jay, how are you, brother?
I am wonderful. How are you, my guy?
Good, man. Listen, getting this year started on a good foot. We got a lot of people requesting to be on the podcast, which is really good. We have a very interesting guest tonight that we're going to actually have an interview with. Yep, Mr. John Kirwin. He is the author of the Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for Persecuted Truthers. And it's basically a book about how a person who believes in conspiracy theories, can really
navigate life.
Yeah, you how to navigate life. And some of the people in your life may not,
navigate with you.
Navigate with you. That's a good way to put it, Jay. Understand what you're talking about and maybe have a nefarious way of thinking about it and ultimately putting their relationship with you to ultimatums. And, it's how to, basically deal with all that stuff. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later here in the podcast. But first, Jay, I just wanted to remind everybody how can they listen to this wonderful podcast here, Jay, that we do every week for everybody?
You can catch us exclusively on Spreaker. You could also find us at other places you might find podcasts. You can definitely get all of our content, which is the best of the best that ever was, there ever will be, that could ever do it. darkfringeradio.com.
There you go. I couldn't say it better myself, Jay. Thanks so much. And that's exactly where you could find all our stuff. And also, if you could, check us out on YouTube, and you can watch the actual episode and see our faces and see the people that we're actually interviewing. Of course, at Dark Fringe Radio on YouTube. So make sure you go there, you subscribe, and you like all our stuff. We really appreciate that. We appreciate the support when you guys do that. It just helps us out tremendously. So thank you. Jay. So we're going to get into it here in a minute with Mr. John Kirwin. And again, Jay, I mean, this guy has paid what they say is probably the most ultimate price when it comes to being a conspiracy theorist. And we're going to get into all that here in a minute. But please make sure you don't go anywhere, because we're going to get into our interview here with Mr. John Kirwin, the author of the Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for Persecuted Truthers, here in a minute. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today at Dark Fringe Radio. Today, beyond the headlines and whispered speculations, lies a realm of where belief systems diverge, and skepticism weaves a complex tapestry of alternative narratives. It's a space occupied by individuals who, by their very nature, question the status quo. They're called the conspiracy theorists. We confront the intriguing intersection of personal convictions and interpersonal relationships and how that all works. How do these individuals navigate the delicate balance between their unconventional beliefs and the bonds that they share with family and friends? Or even worse, when they become ostracized by the same people that are closest to them. In this exploration, we aim to unravel the threads that tie the lives of conspiracy theorists to their closest connections, shedding the light on challenges, tensions, and the unique dynamics that unfold within the sphere of personal relationships. Join us today as we're embarking on a journey to understand the impact of the conspiratorial thinking on the familial and social landscapes these individuals inhabit. To help us along this journey, our guest today is Mr. John Kirwin, author of the book entitled The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide. John Kirwin has served in full and part-time ministry as a worship leader and a pastor, and was a day trader. But the results of his beliefs, of course, cost a heavy toll in his personal life. And now to help us to, guide us through the treacherous waters of being a conspiracy theorist, let's give a big round of applause for our guest, Mr. John Kirwin. John, thank you so much for coming on Dark Fringe Radio.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys. It's a great intro.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to a great conversation. Sounds like we're all on the same page for sure.
100%. 100%. Read your book. You sent me a copy. I'm very appreciative of that. And I was really able to, dig deep into a lot of the concepts that you're talking about. It's kind of funny, I've been doing my podcast here for over 7 years now. And, we talk about a lot of the same stuff that you mentioned in the book. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of like almost like opening back, a scab in a way, because, I kind of went through some of the same things, not exactly what you went through, but some of the same things that you went through as far as, your relationships are concerned, or relationships with people that are close to you. Let's go back first, before we get into all that, to the genesis of what kind of got you down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole, as they say. What was maybe the incident, or maybe subject matter that kind of got you into this whole thing?
Yep. It's a very common story for many of us. We're kind of sailing along, doing life. We haven't really woken up yet. It's one terminology we use. And then somehow it just seems like God taps you on the shoulder and he says, "Hey, did you notice that?" Whatever it is. For me, it was the Federal Reserve wasn't federal.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting topic.
My experience that I went through after realizing that actually turns out to be very similar, in that what I did then, once I realized that all of the government officials knew it wasn't federal, but that they were pretending it was, I realized, hey, all these guys are lying. And so then what I did was I said, well, if that's not true, what else isn't true? And what I now believe is that is the genesis of your journey. That's when you become born again, essentially. You become converted from what we call the unconvinced, or normie, which is sort of a derogatory term, but they named themselves normie, to this other group, which is called the truther. And basically the definitions of the two categories: the normie, or the unconvinced, doesn't know and doesn't want to know. So they're in willful ignorance. They have shut off their brains. They don't look. Whereas the truther now is questioning officialdom, and they're saying, well, that's not true. What else isn't true? And you start turning over rocks, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. And just like you said in your intro, what we're talking about today is not whether or not the moon landing was faked. Okay, we're talking to the people that know it's faked,
right?
But the people in your life don't know it's fake. And this has caused a great chasm to form between you, and it becomes, very difficult to sustain relationships.
Oh yeah, it does. And, it's put a strain on my relationship when my mom was around. And just to give an example, we butted heads all the time when it came to this particular subject. She was a very devout Jehovah's Witness. And so that alone created such a divide, coming from that, belief system versus to the things that I believe in, which is completely, out there as far as, seeing what the truth is, and really realizing, what's been put in place for us to kind of like live in this kind of bubble that they've put us in. And it's interesting what you write about in your book, how when you become a truther, things change for you. The world is not the same again. Explain a little bit about that, if you could.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, your paradigm changes. All of your ideals change, and it's very rapid. It's like overnight. well, then your priorities change. So now you're on a new course. I liken it to someone that was living on a cruise ship and then they shift over to a battleship. Because a lot of the things that we discover are bad news. They're life-threatening. You find out that the world is run by psycho mobsters that are Luciferian too. They're really evil. And if the Georgia Guidestones is any indication of what they want to do to you, it's not good. And so you're alarmed, and this is a very common and normal response, truther. Congratulations, you're right and they're wrong. And your response is correct. You're not obsessed. If you're in a burning building, you're supposed to be obsessed. They're apathetic. They are like the British guards. When you go over there to Britain and then you go up to the guard and you go, hey, woo, and you try to get them to look and they won't look at you. That's what normies are like. And it's extremely frustrating.
No, it is. It is. And it creates a dichotomy in, the relationships that you have, like you've mentioned many times in your book. It becomes very stressful, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of things that go along with it. Going back to something that you said earlier, you talked about the moon landing. I know we're not here to initiate the uninitiated, as they say, but give me some of your thoughts about the moon landing and why you think why you've come up to your personal conclusion. I mean, I have my conclusion. We did a whole podcast on it. Matter of fact, me and my co-host are completely different sides on that particular discussion, because I'm a believer that we've never been there. I don't think we can get past the Van Allen radiation belt or even past the dome, as they say. But what is your points of contention when it comes to that particular as they say, theory?
Okay, well, that was, I think, my second rabbit hole. I have a new concept I'm developing now. It's called your rabbit hole portfolio.
I like
How many
that.
rabbit holes are you down at this point? Once you reach about 10 rabbit holes, you're pretty much useless to any normies in your life.
No, that's true.
You become such a freakazoid that they can't take you anymore. Anyway, I think, what happens is once you see, then you see. So a filter comes off. A great way to understand it is if you've ever decided, let's say you're going to buy a Honda Accord, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you drive around, you start noticing Honda Accords. Well, that's the reticular activation center of your brain. It filters out anything that's inconsistent with your paradigm. But once your paradigm changes, you start to see more. And it's really magical. So here I come. I'm now sort of asking questions. I'm questioning officialdom. Okay. I'm saying, I don't, if they lied over here, maybe they're lying over here. So now my mind is open and I go and I start to look at the videos on, the moon landing is fake. And it took about 5 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't long, right?
I mean, I'm like, how did we never see this before? So one of the most really bizarre things is the lesser magic and the ability of the elite to get us to shut our brains off. Because the Matrix, it has a physical construct to it. We live in this corporal realm, but it is definitely a metaphysical thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a bewitchment. And it's only by the grace of God that he taps you on the shoulder and just points it out. It's up to you then to stand in integrity. When you get bad news, if integrity dictates how you're going to respond to it. So a lot of people don't want their happy life messed up. So when they see the same evidence that you and I see, they shut their brains off because it's too painful and they go back to loving the world, basically.
Right. So it's kind of like that ignorance is bliss kind of thing, like in the Matrix, where the guy meets up with the agent. He's like, you know what? Ignorance is bliss. I'd rather stay in the Matrix and just, believe whatever it is, believe this pie in the sky kind of thing. And I can see what you're talking about. I mean, it's amazing that, that people, stick to their roots that way. What do you say to those normies that, and I already know the answer to this question, but I wanted to get your opinion on it. But what do you say to the normies that come to you and say, and they've said it to me, well, how do you know better than an astrophysicist, or how do you know better than a scientist, or how do you know better than those guys at CERN, or how do you know better than Neil deGrasse Tyson? What do you say to those people?
I actually have a subchapter in my book called I Know More Than All the Astrophysicists.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Tesla, I can't quote it. Maybe I can pull it up real quick. Basically, Tesla, who was probably one of the smartest guys that ever lived, said that scientists have exchanged truth for endless equations, and they wander off into things that have nothing to do with reality. That's basically what he said. So what happens is you get these appeals to authority where scientism is either complete conjecture or prepackaged bold-faced lies. The structure is lying to us. That's the first, my first response. So what you have to realize is that got what I was going to say. How do you know more than astrophysicists? Okay, so an astrophysicist is in a bad situation. He's got a mortgage and a car payment and a lifestyle, and he knows that if he sees the flat Earth proofs, because there's many PhDs and astrophysicists that have come out for flat Earth, for instance, and they went to debunk it, and the more they looked, they couldn't find any curve anywhere they looked, and so what happens is it cost them their job. They were unfunded. They lost tenure. They got fired. You get ostracized. It's hell on earth. Same thing with pilots. Pilots will admit secretly that the Earth is flat, but they won't tell you publicly because they'll lose their pilot license. Same with doctors. Doctors will lose their license. So that's part of it. But there are many within the system that have actually drank the Kool-Aid. And so that has to do with your paradigm as well, because if you don't want something to be true, you can convince yourself of just about anything. So I'm unbiased. I don't have, all I want is the truth. I listen to the round earth people. Their arguments are very unconvincing. And I don't want to be conspiratorial or anything, but
no, but listen, it's happening, man. It happens. I mean, they're listening. They're constantly listening. I mean, I'll give you a good example. I was talking with a coworker of mine the other day. We were talking about, what was it? Something completely off the wall. I mean, something that I would never research or search up in my entire life. And next thing I know, in my cell phone, it's popping up everywhere as ads. I mean, it's wild. Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, the ads, your phone's listening to you, and then it throws you ads that are what you were talking about.
Exactly. So crazy. But going back to what we were talking about, talking about how people say that, how could we know more than these scientists? And you've hit the nail on the head. And another example of that I've seen lately is the narrative of our history. You know what I mean? I'm a big follower of Graham Hancock and how he talks about, civilizations that basically have been covered up, and, how they keep pushing back the timeline of history. And, nobody really has a grasp of when things happen. So to me, it just seems like, how can you believe, what was told to us, after discovering all these things now? But going back to your book,
wait, before you go further, I want to make one other response to this, because this is an important question.
Yeah.
That's a very common question. And it's actually a attack vector. Okay. So what they're saying is, this is an appeal to authority. How can you know more than the astrophysicist? Who are you, you little peon? How dare you try to wade into such a topic? You're not reputable. Okay, now none of those things are proof. That's an a priori argument. That's a presupposition that because there's people with degrees, that what I'm saying isn't valid, but that's not proof. What's proof is that you can see a lighthouse from 50 miles away, or you can go anywhere on the earth and you can see 50 miles or 100 miles anywhere. Well, if what NASA is telling us is true, then that shouldn't be possible. That's proof. So once the astrophysicist tells me how that can happen, then I can come back over to his side. But until he does, I'm a flat earther. I'm sorry, that offends people. But the reason it offends people is simply because of pride. Because what you believe is if the earth is really flat, then you'd have to be stupid to have them tricked you into that. So I'm sorry, have one good despair and get it over with like the rest of us, because the earth is flat. It is flat.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how that particular theory came out, probably 7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and really made a splash. And, it really changed a lot of people. And maybe it was the catalyst for them becoming from a normie to a conspiracy theorist. But that process, becoming a truther, there's a thing in your book that you talk about. There's a particular subject about consciousness and how that plays an integral part in the process of becoming a truther. Expound on that if you could a little bit.
Of course. Well, what happens is we all have a conscience, right? It's the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. Don't do it, Will. Go ahead, do it, Will. You should do it, right? So that's innate. It's built into us from God. It's the knowledge between right and wrong. So now you're bouncing along, you're doing life, and all of a sudden, and we'll use the moon landing as an archetype for any conspiracy. It could be the government, it could be, the underground bases, chemtrails, whatever the thing is. Okay. So you realize that all of these proofs are fake. The picture of the Earth from space is not a picture of the Earth from space. It's 12 strips of data. It's a cartoon. They've been lying to you. Then you see they gave a moon rock to the museum, and it was actually petrified wood. They're lying to you. Piltdown Man was a lie. That was a pig's nose and a jaw of a man. So these are proofs that they have a pattern of lying. So what does that mean? Well, that means they're liars. And that's wrong. But that's as far as the conscience goes. You're vexed by that. But now integrity steps onto the stage, and you're forced to choose how you're going to respond to that. So what integrity is basically morals that you have, that you pre-established in advance that you're going to live by, like the 10 Commandments are an example of morals. And they're typically tied to God. And so what you say is, well, if they're lying, then integrity demands that I no longer clap for NASA like a trained SEAL at the next family gathering. Well, that's going to bring a hellstorm down on you. And this is where integrity steps in. Integrity says, not on my watch. I don't care what the consequences are. I have integrity. That's the key.
That's the key
between you, truther, and the people at your family gathering who are snarky, cynical, and attacking you, because they have a death to truther algorithm that they're running. They're not just disagreeing with you. They're trying to shut you down, baby.
Oh yeah. What's the common denominator as far as what they call you as soon as they run out of things to deliberate? I mean, what do they say at the end of the day? Which obviously, once they call you this, there's nothing really much else you could really argue about. But what's the common denominator? I already know what it is, but please tell the listeners.
Well, there's a broad range of terms. I mean, of course, conspiracy theorist is the most ingenious and effective mind control term ever created.
It is CIA.
Oh my gosh. It's 1967 Bulletin put out talking points for journalists to repeat to try to quell the people that were questioning the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And one of the talking points was, tell them that they're insecure and they gravitate towards these things because it makes them feel significant. How many times have people ever said that to you, Will?
Plenty of times.
Yeah, and see, those people, when they said that, they didn't realize that they were just regurgitating a talking point that was written by some analyst in a basement in Langley 50 years ago.
Yeah.
They thought that was their own original idea.
Yeah, and they always call you crazy. You know, that they
Yes.
always divert to that, you know, at the end of the
Yes.
day. You know, once they run out of you know, talking points, the last thing they always jump on is, oh, you know, you're the crazy one, you know, to believe in all these things. But you know, again, I want to talk about your book, The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide. And of course, your website is actually something that's pretty spectacular, by the way. Wakeuporelse.com. I implore everybody that's listening to the podcast today to go check that out. But this whole thing, this whole belief system that you've adopted, I've adopted personally a long time ago, it's cost you a lot in your personal life. Let's talk about that if you could, if you don't mind, a little bit, and explain to me what happened, and you know, what was your response to it, and how did you kind of like wade the waters of that?
Mm, yeah, I have had a beautiful wife who I love to this moment, and I would go back to. She asked me to leave after 24 years of marriage.
Unbelievable,
And about,
unbelievable.
I don't know, 6 months ago, I guess, we've been divorced now for 2 years, maybe a little longer. I said, honey, this is madness. I don't want to grow old without you. I love you. And she said, I don't want to be married to you. We're in two different worlds. And I said, well, if you found out that my world is true, would you apologize? And she said, yes. But I understand the concepts of tact and diplomacy and age appropriate and not ramming things down people's throats and not I don't advocate that anybody sacrifice their marriage or their friendships or their relationships with their kids on the altar of truth. However, depending on who you are in the mix, like if you're the husband and the father, and you are being emasculated and you're being given ultimatums of either shut up or else, if you talk about crazy things, I can't have a relationship with you,
Mhm.
is what I was told. I said, okay. So, we go down the rabbit hole, and we get this urgency, but they're not going along for the ride. I get it. It's a tough place to be. However, for 2 years, I didn't say anything. I was what I call happy dad. And I just went to the dinner table and I would just sit there and eat and just nod and talk about hair and nails and play
Everyday stuff.
dates and
Yeah.
movies. And it's intolerable, being a truther around normies because they just talk about nothing endlessly. And you're
Mhm.
just so frustrated by it.
Mhm.
But, I want them in my life. So I give them what they demand, which is to observe this boundary where you never challenge any of their views, and you essentially remain silent for the rest of your life. So you are forced to pretend that you're deceived like they are by being silent, and it's under threat. So that's the scarlet letter that was given in the Puritan days. When someone was caught in adultery, they'd be publicly flogged, and
Yeah.
then they'd have to wear the red scarlet letter, which meant if you get caught doing it again, we'll flog you again.
Right.
And then the tinfoil hat is for shaming you, in because now they have the whole power structure behind them, so they're
Mhm.
emboldened. You're at the family gathering and it's just you, there's just little old crazy you with all your crazy, and all of the people on CNN disagree with you, Sally. What are you talking about? It's a tough place to be.
It is. Oh, I've been there. Trust me. I've been at
Yup.
those family dinners where like, and then you know they're talking about you know, a Stanley you know, cup holder, and I'm like, this is just, you know, another example of another psyop. I mean,
Yup.
and it's hard for people to really, you know, understand where you're coming from, because, and especially if you've been down the rabbit hole for so long, that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother aspect. If you've been in that position for a long time, and then you know, you get around normies, as you say, and next thing you know, they're looking at you with crossed eyes, and you're looking at you like you're an alien. Another thing that I wanted to talk to you about in your book, and I found very interesting, is some of the things that you know, you point out as to what can help us, you know, conspiracy theorists kind of wade through the waters, you know, and help them, you know, kind of not sacrifice the things that you've had to sacrifice, and kind of maybe, you know, understand what you're going through, because a lot of people once they become a truther, they really don't understand what that is. There's no religion, truther.com, or the Church of Truthers Christ or something like, it doesn't
Well,
exist.
there is. It's called
Well,
Wake Up or Else on
Wake Up
YouTube.
or Else.
That's
There you
exactly
go.
what we do.
But in a traditional sense, like I'm saying, in a macro type of way, there isn't anything like that. But thank God there is, avenues like yours and our podcast and things like that and others that help people. But what what do you think that it takes for the uninitiated that are in relationships with the truther to help them kind of cross that bridge, or maybe not so much, try to convince them right away, but what helps them cross that bridge? What do you think?
Okay, this is such an incredible question because I'm just finishing my next talk and I don't know what I'm going to title it, but it's basically like, help, I'm now down over 10 rabbit holes and I've passed the point of no return with my normie family.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so what I found, this is my rabbit hole portfolio concept.
Okay.
So there's a direct correlation between how many rabbit holes you're down and how intolerable it is to get along with your. Okay, so in other words, if someone's only down a few rabbit holes, their narrative is going to be much more leaning towards, well, you can't push things down people's throats. They're going along to get along. But once you find out that you are in imminent peril of losing your life, and we've been vindicated with the health emergency thing. Are we on YouTube or anything with this?
Yeah, that's okay. They'll let it fly. Yeah.
So we were vindicated in that the power structure does want you dead. They've implemented a eugenics program, and you're the target, and they're coming after you 16 different ways now. Okay, so that's what we know. So what happens is the more you know that, the less tolerant you become, basically, to just continue to be silent. Yeah. And you basically like end up saying, you people are nuts and you're going to get us all killed. And you need to either cut bait or fish. Right. Now, that's fine if it's lifelong friends or people at work or people in your church family or wherever. But when it's your spouse and your children, you're bound to them by blood and all kinds of horrible emotional trauma that is going to happen if you cut ties with them. So you can't. But yet, you are thrust into a dynamic with them that is intangible. My answer to your question is that it's an irreconcilable difference, because what I found is, because I'm a content creator, I've interacted with tens of thousands of people over the last 7 years. And I probably have interacted directly with about 200 that have been divorced by their spouses over these things. No, almost never the other way around. Truthers don't divorce their family members or give them ultimatums, right? We don't say, hey, if you don't talk to me about these things I've discovered, I can't have a relationship with you. We don't say that.
No. Because that's just doesn't make sense to do that. I mean, and we understand that. And again, living in that construct of being a normie, it's so, like you said, it's irreconcilable, because there's really no way you could break that spell. And that's been, like you said, almost like a bewitching, you know what I mean?
Yes. So all you're left with is what I call slinking around, begging for crumbs of respect. That's all you're left with, because I was just emasculated. I became a pariah in my own home because you're labeled as crazy. I literally had an intervention. I came home one night and my wife is in the sunroom with the pastor, assistant pastor, and the deacon, and they're having an intervention. My wife's saying, you need to take medication. Well, and that's broadcasted to the kids. So dad's gone nuts. Well, there goes trust. If you look up the definition of trust, it means the belief that someone has integrity and is and is honorable. So you're slimed, you're dishonored, you're diminished, and you're put into the corner with a dunce cap, and you can't function. And so then all you're allowed to do is like live out of this little 2% of you. Like what I noticed is the last 7 years, one of my kids one time has asked me, how you doing, Dad? They no longer ask me how I'm doing, because they don't want to open the door
They
for
don't
me
want
to
to
start saying something crazy.
open.
So how do you have a relationship? It's a
Right.
relationship ending mandate. Don't talk about what is important to you. Don't talk to me about you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
End of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All you do is float around the edges and fun seasons in the sun, and then that's it. There
Mm.
is no relationship. It's on them.
It is. It is. What do you say to what's going on right now in the political world when they use the word wokeness? This is something that's become demonized as well, being woke and been put out there. What's your opinion on something like that? Because again, it kind of speaks to the whole concept of the conspiracy theorist title. Is this something now that they're trying to use to as a leverage tool to gain more control over you? What's your opinion on this?
Well, yeah, it's a religion. It's institutional racism. I'm
Mhm.
against racism, but wokeism is trying to get me to bow my knee to this um, politically correct, where I participate in your subjective view of reality, right? So you're a man, but you're identifying as a woman. Okay, go ahead. Identify as a light bulb. No, you have to acknowledge that I'm a female. Well, that's my boundary crossed now.
Right.
So wokeism is a an attempt to strong arm you into being, participating in their madness.
Mhm.
It's not, you know, me, being racist.
Mhm.
To me, the most racist people are the ones that are talking about racism all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It is so true. And you know what? It's funny how, once somebody becomes a truther and their circle gets a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And you become, as we've talked about, ostracized. You're ridiculed on social media. As being a content creator myself, I post things that are controversial or outside the normal thinking or alternative view, and first thing that I'm called is crazy. Of
Yeah.
course, that's the number one. Crazy. Tinfoil hat, that's another one, of course. Um, you know, the list goes on and on, but continue to be ridiculed online just because I'm pointing out an alternative view on something that goes against the norm. And when something goes against the norm, it's very hard for the normies to kind of wrap their heads around that. Let's go back and talk about what can we do as conspiracy theorists. What are some tips that you can give us that can guide of help us not fall into some of these pitfalls and help us guide us going through uh you know through life and trying to secure our relationships with the people that we love.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, just the validation
Hmm.
is important for your sanity. Like when I found out that my experience wasn't me so
Hmm.
much as because it's essentially a universal response that we all have. I mean, I get posts almost every day. Yeah, John, my kids don't talk to me either. Think about that.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
children don't talk to you anymore. Well, you must be, it's really you. No,
Hmm.
no. I mean, I've got issues just like anybody else, but I didn't leave. I was asked to leave. I didn't break up my family.
Hmm.
I didn't
Hmm.
put ultimatums on my kids.
Right.
So, however, like I said, the last 2 years I was in the house, I was silent. But what would happen was I would be watching TV with them, watching a movie or whatever,
Hmm.
and the term conspiracy theorist would be invoked on the TV, and
Mm.
everybody would kind of look at me and snicker. Well,
Mm.
I realized this is not cool. I mean, I'm trying to observe your boundary. I'm not bringing this up. And so what I came up with is this, and a lot of people told me this has really helped them. I came up with this. If you invoke if you're in my presence and you invoke the term conspiracy theorist, crazy, kook, fringe, ridiculous, nonsense, any of those like snarky types of concepts, I hold up my finger and I say, excuse me, I may be mistaken, but I'm not crazy. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't use that terminology in my presence because it's very insulting. That's my boundary.
Right. Right.
Okay, here's another one. I was told, Dad, if you talk about crazy things, I can't have a relationship with you. All right, now the problem with that relationship ending mandate is what do you consider crazy? So I ended up making a list. It's in my book. It's 3 pages long in a Word document of what I think you would consider crazy if you knew what I believed about it. Simulated sun, chemtrails, underground bases, Luciferian elite running the world, South Pole Treaty. I mean, just on and on and on, right? So that means we can't talk about Trump. We can't talk about taxes. We can't talk about gravity. We can't, all the science stuff, politics, military, all geopolitical. It's basically it's everything. Now, what I tried to do is give one of my kids the list and said, look, I'm trying to comply with your issue, your boundary, but here's what's happening. And this just happened about a month ago.
Oh, okay.
I'm told, don't talk about things that are negative or controversial. And then I'm sitting there with one of them, and they start bringing up a school shooting where a trans person shot up a Christian school. We know that was false flagged. The video was obvious that it was fake. There was all these anomalies. So what does that mean? So you're being told basically this: don't talk about school shootings, and then you're brought into a conversation about school shootings. So how are you supposed to handle that?
Right.
Okay, because what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to not bring up school shootings. What I'm not willing to do is if you bring it up, I'm not willing to mouth and parrot the words that I think you want to hear. Like, I'm not going to bullface lie and clap for NASA or whatever it is. So another boundary that I've now established with my kids is this: I'm not going to try to convince you of anything. I'm not your savior. I'm not your mentor. Unless you start asking me questions and apologize. First, you have to apologize to me for the disrespect that I've been dragged through. And then you have to start asking me intelligent questions. Then I can help you, okay? But aside from that, I've turned you over to the care of God, okay? So I'm not going to talk to you about anything except happy things. However, if you bring it up, you're going to hear what I have to say. So I got to walk on eggshells around you. Now you got to walk on eggshells around me. Now, here's my last point. If that offer is unacceptable to you, now this is what I told my children. I accept your terms, which means we won't have a relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's what you told me. You told me, if you talk about crazy things, I can't have a relationship with you. My response is, okay, we won't have a relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's where you have to kind of cut it at the end of the day. You know what I mean? There's a line in the sand, and I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from. Let's talk about, something that you just touched on there for a second, the concept of false flag. This is something that does not wrap around the mind of a normie. Let's talk about what a false flag is. I know what it is, you know what it is, but let's talk to the listeners and kind of, enlighten them if they don't already know about what a false flag is and how it, what its purpose is.
Well, they've been used for centuries, of course. Hitler, started the fire and the wherever, and swept him into power. And you have declassified versions of that, like Project Northwoods and the Gulf of Tonkin, were both false flags that have been declassified. Project Northwoods is unbelievable. It was the military industrial complex wanting to, have a perpetual war going, and they were willing to bomb and attack civilian targets in the US and blame it on Cuba to start the war.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? You think they stopped doing that now? You think that was a one and done thing? Those are just two examples.
Right.
There's many, many, many examples of that.
9/11 was another one.
Well, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like absolutely.
That's what got me into the whole conspiracy theory realm. I
Yep.
mean, before that it was the JFK theory, but I was still kind of on the fence. And then when 9/11 happened, and I'm 44, so I was alive when it happened, and I was an adult at that time. I looked at that and I was like, this is so obvious.
Yes.
It's so obvious. It's right there. And then you saw the progression of where it went down. It went to it literally went from this. It went from the day before 9/11, Rumsfeld talking about losing $3 trillion somewhere in the Pentagon.
Right.
Right. And then that gets overshadowed by 9/11, of course. And then Building 7 goes down, which, housed a lot of that money that was missing supposedly. And how did Building 7 go down when it didn't even get hit? And then it goes to looking for weapons of mass destruction. And then, Iraq supposedly having that. And then no weapons of mass destruction. And all in all, we lost all these people's lives. We went to war. We spent millions and trillions of dollars for what?
Well, to centralize power and to get us to be willing to have to go through scanners at the airport. And, you hear that all the time when you watch the First Amendment audits, because I'm an American state national. So I'm really into the legal education movement. And, you see all of the cops always invoking this concept. Well, now in these days with 9/11, we have to violate your First Amendment rights and your Fourth Amendment rights. It's we have permission to enslave you now. That's what they're saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So, because the Patriot Act was, I don't know how many pages it was, several thousand, and it was all ready to go like 2 days after the
It was
9/11.
ready.
So what does that tell you?
Yeah, it was amazing when it did. I mean, it was a different time before and after that event. Obviously, as you know, things changed, I think for the worse because of that. Again, false flags have been going on for so long now. And when we become so cognizant of it, it's so easy to point out now. You know what I mean? After we've been seeing it so many times play out through history, it's amazing. It really is amazing how some people just won't wake up to it. And like you said, the ignorance is bliss theory. It's just amazing how people will just keep those blinders on and go on through life without even, thinking about it. But again, we're not talking about the uninitiated, of course, here today. We're talking about how we can survive being a conspiracy theorist. And your website, wakeuporelse.com, tell us a little bit about that. I found that to be a great tool. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell our listeners what you cover on that website and so on.
Yeah. So I wanted to make this is 7 years I've been doing this, and I wanted to make it a place to activate people. So I'm not just disseminating information myself. I'm creating resources on there. So there's a resources tab, and there's all kinds of scripts and PowerPoints. And my primary path that I'm on, the lane that I'm in, is to provide a biblical analysis of the Mandela effect. Because if you've looked into the Mandela effect, it's pretty clear that there's something going on. There's thousands of channels on every platform. Some YouTube channels have several 100,000 subscribers. I've got almost 7,000. I have about 20 to 30 new subscribers a day.
That's wonderful.
Well, what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the reality that you're in is now not the same as you vividly remember it. So the Monopoly guy doesn't have a monocle, and mirror, mirror on the wall never existed. And, there's thousands of examples in multiple categories, and there's 7 different kinds of proof to document that this is taking place. Well, one of the things that's changing in the reality is the Bible. Well, that is a whole nother level of destiny and relevance. Because after a while, who cares if it's Skippy peanut butter or Jif or, right? Smokey
Berenstein
the Bear.
or Berenstein Bears, right. Which one is it, right?
Right. But what I came, because I come from a biblical worldview, I was in the ministry, is that the entire body of Christ, for the most part, is either unaware of this or they've heard of it and deny it because they have a false doctrine that the Bible can't change. And really, long story short, the term Bible, the term scripture, and the term word of God are being conflated to mean the same thing. But they're three different things. The Bible is a collection of 66 books that contain the scriptures, which is a term that basically just describes the writings. And what are the writings? The writings contain the words of God. And so all the promises that are being put forward to suggest that the Bible couldn't change from the Mandela effect are promises that the word of God won't change. Well, that's not the scriptures. So for instance, Psalms 119:89, I believe it is, says, "Thy word, O Lord, is forever settled in heaven." So all of the scriptures that they're relying on actually support our position. It's not being preserved on the pages of the book. It's being preserved in heaven. And pretty much the idea is that it wouldn't happen because it would make God a liar, but he hasn't promised that it won't change. So first of all, he's not a liar. And secondly, it doesn't say it won't change. So and it is changing. And so that created a whole mission for me that I have now basically been addressing this with the entire church of, look, I'm sorry for your problems, but this is happening and you're going to have to deal with it. So that's what I talk about mostly in the journey of the truther.
What's your position on the, since you follow the Christian faith, what's your position on, some of the books that were not included in the Bible, for instance, like the Book of Enoch and, some other ones as well. What do you say to, people who don't even know about that? I mean, I knew about the Bible growing up, of course, but I didn't know that there was these other texts that were out there and that, were supposedly part of the Bible and were taken out and omitted or whatever the case may be. What's your position on that?
Well, Enoch is a very unique book in that he was a patriarch, and he was a superhero patriarch because he's one of only two that the Bible says he was raptured. He had his own little personal rapture. It says he walked with God and then he was not, for God took him. And he's quoted in Jude. His writings are quoted. So his book is at the very least prophetic. And the church history tells us that the early church did embrace the book of Enoch as, the writings, it was inspired, is the term we use. But it's vehemently attacked by most Christian leaders as being, anathema. Is if you invoke the term, you're immediately attacked. And that makes it suspect to me that maybe it's supposed to be in there. If you study the canon, how the canon came to be, and even the Bible, King James was gay, and there's all these questions around the thing. But my position is this: I was converted by the Bible. My life changed overnight, and I met Jesus. I met the author. So I have no question that the what was given to the original authors was inspired. And I now have proof of that. It's a book called Math Proves the Bible. And it's so unbelievably, absolutely cut and dry that the book could not have been written by man. It's a supernatural book written by a deity, not ETs or anything like that.
Right.
So that makes the biblical narrative extremely authoritative. So we're not in a simulation. If the Bible's true, you're not in well, you could be in a simulation, but it's just God that created it. And so from that point, I don't try to defend the Bible as being perfect and inerrant like the King James only preserved word Baptists do. I think they're pushing an agenda which is not realistic. it's sufficient for you to come to knowledge of God and know what he wants you to do. But it's fairly cryptic. It's a hodgepodge of 66 books by 44 authors over 1,600 years on 3 continents. Now, but it reads like one book. And it changes lives, and there's a church on every corner. So there must be something to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of people that shape their whole life around this book. So don't just blow it off like it's nonsense and, oh, there's hypocrites in every church. Well, there's hypocrites at the supermarket. You still go get some groceries, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. 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 You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You touched on something earlier. You being in an American state,
yes, American State National.
Yes. And you talk about it in your book too. You talk about a little bit of the process, the processes as to become one of that stature. Talk a little bit about that and how your website kind of helps with that as well, and explain exactly, if you could, what that is.
This is fascinating. It's another humongous rabbit hole, and it's one that I really like because it's kinetic. So, as content creators, our hope is that we will free people's minds. And then there's sort of a trickle down effect where we then impact the world, right? But this one actually puts real solutions in your hand. And basically what it is, to understand it, it's very simple. This is the analogy I use. If you go to Walmart and you're a customer and you're in the grocery section and the manager comes over and he says, hey, Will, I need you to take this, or he says, he doesn't know your name. Hey, you. Take this broom and go sweep up in the back. What are you going to tell him?
You're nuts. I'm not doing anything.
Right. Yeah. He has no jurisdiction over you. However, if 2 weeks prior you'd come in and filled out a job application and you were accepted, now you got a name tag on. Now he comes over and says, hey, Will, I need you to go take this broom and sweep up in the back. Now you're going to comply because you want the paycheck. All right. So we, as United States citizens, have been tricked into working for a corporation called United States Inc. But it's worse than that, because the city that you live in has a Dun & Bradstreet number. The county has a Dun & Bradstreet number. The state has one. And then all the DA, all the way down to the dog catcher, the court system, the police department. You can look it up on Dun & Bradstreet's number. It's how to do it is in my book. And you'll find that, let's say the judge, you go to traffic court, the judge is an employee of a privately held for-profit business. So is the cop that pulled you over. He's an employee he's the manager at Walmart. Now, my question is, do you work for the state? Are you an employee of the state or the city you live in? Are you?
I think you are as soon as you're born. As soon as that birth certificate is issued, I think that's the tying link right there. That's what, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. But like, if I get pulled over, the guy isn't God, right? He's not my daddy.
Right.
And I'm not his property. So what right does he have to tell me to do anything? The only way he could have the right to tell me to do anything is if I have a contract with him. All right. So what happens is, in my original scenario, is if you go into work one day and you quit, you tell him, I quit. And you get, out through HR and you're done. Now, if you go back in, now he can't tell you to sweep up anymore. So that's essentially what becoming American State National is. You quit the company. You send an affidavit to Washington, D.C. and Attorney General, and then you go get a passport that reflects your new civil status. And that is 8 USC 1401 is the definition of U.S. citizen is a person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Versus 8 USC 1101A21, definition of American State National, a person owing permanent allegiance to a state. So there are 2 separate civil designations that you can occupy. You can choose to opt out of the one that you were presumed into at birth through the doctrines of parens patriae, which means the state is your parent. And you can say, I object. I don't consent to this presumption and this fraud over me anymore. Once fraud is discovered in a contract, it voids the contract. I'm going to extricate myself from this fraud, and I'm going to opt into this with this affidavit. I am now this. Now, if you don't respond within 21 days, that means you agree. So then we show you how to post a affidavit recorded in the Register of Deeds, so that it becomes a court of record. So now you've essentially established legally that you are no longer this 14th Amendment slave class citizen. Because it says a person born in the United States. You can look up this chapter and verse. The United States is a 12 or 10 square mile radius in the District of Columbia. Were you born in the District of Columbia, Will?
Nope.
No, so it's total fraud.
Right.
Now, for those who are skeptical, here's two of many Supreme Court rulings. Tashiro v. Jordan. It is clear that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state. Here's another one. U.S. v. Anthony. The term resident and citizen of the United States, that's the 10 square mile area, is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states. So you're still a U.S. citizen. But what we don't understand is that there's two of everything. Okay, there's two of you. There's the you that is a corporate fiction that's created at birth, and it's made of all capital letters. And they get you to stand in for that corporate fiction. And they monetize your signature, and they just give you the runaround, tax you to death, all this stuff. But then there's the living you, the real man you. There's the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service. They're not the same. There's the Post Office and the United States Postal Service. One is corporate, one is republic. There's United States and there's the United States of America. One is de facto, one is de jure. So the court system is the same. When you walk into any court, it used to be there was two separate courts. One was common law and one was civil. They combined them, but they're both still in operation. You just have to know how to invoke your own common law court. But where it gets really cool is when you realize that statutes are not law. Flerney versus First National Bank. A code or statute is not a law. Because the first reaction that people have is, well, what do you mean? You don't think the laws apply to you? No. No, if I harm someone, then I have a duty to restore them. But what I don't have a duty to do is if I don't work for Walmart, I don't have to comply with their policies because I'm not an employee of that company. And the state where I live is a company. So that means I don't have to use my blinker. That is a policy of the company. The term on the side of the car is police. They're policy enforcers. Okay, now this is where it gets really cool. Colonial Pipeline v. Tragle. Statutes apply only to state-created creatures known as corporations. So
State-created creatures, huh?
Yes. Yes, my friend. So my question is, are you a corporation? This is a word salad. This is just word games that they spin us up into. And what we have to do is begin to realize we're in this rabbit hole and start to say, I object. So what this is saying is the policy that the state has created doesn't apply to me as a free man. Bond versus Jay. A statute will not be presumed to have extraterritorial effect outside the jurisdiction. So I'm not responsible for your little policies. Now, the next reaction is, well, that would be anarcha. We have to have laws. I understand that. Okay, if you live in the jungle in a treehouse, there's no red lights there because you don't have to control people's movements. You come into society. All right, so these red lights and stop signs are only a suggestion for sovereign. They're there for us, but they are not the law to a free man. Just like you don't need a license to go ride your bike or to breathe, right? So Scherer v. Cullen. This is the big bombshell one. This is what I've been working up for. For a crime to exist, there must be an injured party. There can be no sanction or penalty imposed on one because of the exercise of a constitutional right. That is Scherer, Scherar versus Cullen, Cullen. For a crime to exist, there must be an injured party. So if I'm driving down the highway and I change lanes and there's a cop behind me and I don't use my blinker and he pulls me over, is there an injured party?
No.
So is there a crime?
No. Essentially, no.
No. Now, the cop doesn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge in the lower court might not even, he might try to run over you. So you have to learn how to fight. But ultimately, where people have gotten into trouble is they've learned the lingo, but they still are working for the company. So don't talk like a king until you are a king. So once you have your superior titles in place, now it's a whole different story. Because now, like, my passport reflects my new civil status. And when if they run it through dispatch, it'll come up, he's not in the jurisdiction. So they just come back and say, have a nice day.
Wow.
It's
just as simple as that, huh?
Yep.
Wow. Again, these are things that are not taught to us.
No.
You know, these are concepts that are never brought up to us. These are things that are not ever talked about, explained. And it's up to us to figure out these things out. And it's thank God for outlets like yourself and your website, wakeuporelse.com. It's just an unmeasurable tool that allows us to kind of expand ourselves beyond the constructs of what we live in currently. And, you know, thank God for these things that we have out there. And I appreciate so much that, you know, sharing all this information, of course. It's the biggest thing is sharing the information, I believe.
There's a tab on there. It's called the State National on the website. And there's all kinds of training and resources. And I actually have what's called Done With You program, where I give you my cell phone number and I take you through the entire process from beginning to end. So you get it done right and, you know, remove the anxiety around it. So you can check that out, wakeuporelse.com, hit the State National tab.
Awesome. Listen, John, I mean, we've covered a lot of different things here today. Tell us a little bit more about the book, where they can find it, and you know, tell us what's maybe next on the horizon for you.
Sure. Yeah, the book's actually available in paperback or audio. You can get it on Amazon, and it's called The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for persecuted truthers. You can also find it from my website, wakeuporelse.com. And then my YouTube channel is Wake Up or Else on YouTube. And we're on Rumble and all the other platforms, but most of it's on there. And we do live streams so you can participate. We also have a Friday night Truther Hangout on freeconferencecall.com. So trying to create fellowships which are emulating a church environment essentially, but we're a Christian fellowship for the truther community. So you believe in God and you're walking with Jesus, but you also believe the earth is flat and the Mandela effect is real and the underground bases, chemtrails, all that. You're a rare bird. Okay. You're in another world from church. The church
which by the way is okay, by the way.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly.
It's all right. It's all right. Well, John, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I mean,
man, it's a really great interview. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you've really enlightened, myself and kind of like, again, like I said, gone back to the whole process of, going through the whole conspiracy theory, evolution, as I would say, personal evolution in everyone's lives. And I appreciate it so much. Check out your website, please, everyone, wakeuporelse.com, and look at some of this information. I think that it's really important for you to check out, and especially if you are a believer like us. So again, John, thanks so much for coming on Dark Fringe Radio. We'll have to have you come back in again in the future.
Please. I'll send you the link whenever you're ready to bring me back. Just hit the link, man. I would love to come back. This was great.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much. Again, check out the website, wakeuporelse.com, and check out all of John's information on there. And thank you so much, John. And we'll have you back on.
Great. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for really riding with us in that interview with Mr. John Kirwin. We really appreciate it. We appreciate Mr. Kirwin for coming on our podcast. And of course, you can check out all of his stuff at wakeuporelse.com. That's where you can find all of his stuff. That's where you can find the book. His book is also available on Amazon. Again, it's the Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for persecuted truthers. And you can see why, he wrote this book, Jay, and it was able to kind of like chronicleize how you can kind of like navigate these waters, being somebody who kind of thinks outside the box. So, again, Jay, where can everybody?
Somebody who thinks outside the box. I can,
Ooh.
that
Yeah.
that would certainly be how I would describe us. And my
Yeah.
guess is our
Yep.
listeners. Yes, if you prescribe to this podcast, if you listen to us, if you like our kind of view on reality and our askew skepticisms, then my guess is this John Fitch's book is going to be right up your alley. So definitely get on Amazon. Definitely check it out. Absolutely. For those who
Yeah.
think outside the box.
Yeah, Jay, I'm gonna actually send you a copy of the book that he sent me. It's digital, but it's really good, and you'll get a good read out of it. It's not a long read. It's probably 300 some odd pages, but it's a good read, and it actually tackles some good points. So again, wakeuporelse.com. Check out Mr. John Kirwin's book, and that's it for tonight for Dark Fringe Radio. Anything else before we say goodnight, Jay?
Friends, let's try to keep ourselves together.
Yeah.
Let's not go causing problems where we don't need to cause problems. And this is a self-realization of just the afternoon. So please be nice to your neighbors.
Yeah.
And have a great night.
There you go. That's a good point, and it's a good way to start 2024, everybody. And thanks for tuning in and listening to Dark Fringe Radio. And we'll have another episode for you guys again next week.
Dark Fringe Radio, your premier source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime.